that it's about people making sense for themselves, becoming their own experts, discovering their own purpose in life and going after what they believe. And I think sometimes when we have peers working across a range of services, other like teams or even sometimes supervisors are asking them to push the boundaries on the value base. So I want to start a so I just put this thing up. What's this thing we call peer support? Because I don't know about you, but it's become the sexy word. Services like let's get peer workers, and then when they get them, it may not be as true as it can be. So I'm using some stuff from Canada because I think their stuff's really cool. I love the stuff that INAPS is doing and some of the SAMHSA stuff, but because I'm in Canada now, I get to use this. It's not scripted. So when we think about supervising, it's like, well, how the hell do we supervise that if we're not really sure? And it's this kind of relationship kind of thing. So for me, that's some of the discussion about the tool that we're going to have. I have a little video, which is my little video that says, this is exactly what peer work is. So I'm going to play it.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would...
So, the reason I played that is because I want to say I think that's what peer support is. Team members who are looking, going, why isn't that peer worker fixing the nail? Because it's about how we support them to like have that person explore what's happening for them and decide whether they want that nail in their head or not. I'm not looking at comments as I go through this, and I will kind of in a sec, but I just wanted to let you know I'm not physically looking at them at the moment. I should say I want you to put comments in there. I want you to ask questions, and I will get to a place at the end where I'm happy to kind of answer all those. So peer support can be anywhere. It can start in those really informal settings, but it can go all the way through to the clinical piece. And I think depending on where it comes up in there as to some of the places that it can be harder to keep peers true to peer support, and looking at what are those values of peer support in action. So part of this today is like, let's talk about it. If we're talking about formalized peer support, like it's where someone with lived experience, people have received training and they're there in positions to support that individuals express wishes. And again, that's sometimes where it can get tricky. And how do we hold those values when we've got pressure to like do certain things? And I'm not saying that always happens.
Right now.
It's also like peer workers sometimes want to fix or help or like solve it for others. So how do we get consistency? We have some consistent values. Now, I've put the values up from the Mental Health Commission of Canada, but I also want to say they are not the only ones out there. They are like very similar to any others like across the world. So the Canadian ones are about hope and recovery, about that like empathetic and equal relationship. The biggies, like they're all big, but the biggies I think about when we're looking at how do they stay true to those values, what do they look like in action, and how do we supervise with that, is the place about integrity, authenticity, and trust, and self-determination. And I am getting to a point like where we're going to have. I know that when we're implementing peer support, sometimes we get these questions. Why don't the peer supporters tell us everything? Because it's not our role, right? It's not our role to be a mole for the service or like tell the service everything that happens. It's our role to support people, to like tell people, other members of the team, what's important. Like, why don't peers use our language? Why aren't they talking clinical language? We want to support people with those values of peer support to stay away from that. Why aren't they making people follow their treatment plan? Because the roles of peer supporters and our role as supervisors is to support peer supporters to have the person explore for themselves. I actually call peer supporters exploration facilitators. And then we also have the what if they get triggered, their self-care and boundaries. And these are a lot of the questions. And I think part of our role as supervisors is how do we work through those? What do we kind of use to support people in a process? So like that's supervision for me about how we support those workers, those peer workers, to stay true to their like peer work. So again, I just put a little kind of piece up about how do we stay true to those values when we've got those competing kind of conversations happening. So the Centre for Innovation in Peer Support, they did a piece about, well, like when they started, there was an area in Canada, in Ontario, that was like a couple of $1 million try and keep the consistency of peer support. So I've just put a slide up kind of about that. So they started with 11 funded services, 40 support workers. They had 24 supervisors and like 25 different programs. And it was like, God, how do we actually do some consistency for this? So they developed a whole lot of stuff about training and implementation, and they set up a research part of this so that there was that ongoing piece and the quality improvement. And then they also started looking at how do we marry all of those pieces together. So, and I just want to say, as far as I know, you get the PowerPoint later, or I can send it to you as well. So what they did, they started by doing a survey. This is about a year after they started. They did a survey of peer workers. They did a survey of peer supervisors, and they kind of found that place about, well, like like, here's where peer workers think their role is, here's where supervisors think their role. And they ask questions like, do you believe that people in the team understand your role? Do you believe there's clarity in your role? Do you believe that you're getting supported to do your role? If people wanted that, if you can like email us, I'm happy to share that. But what they found was there was a role clarity issue. Like, everyone felt that teams didn't really understand this beast, this peer support thing. The supervisors felt like peer workers weren't being used enough, and peer workers were saying the same thing. Mostly the supervisors and the peer workers were saying very similar things about like what wasn't working well. One of the big differences was peer workers said they didn't believe people they were supporting were supported to like make their own choices. Supervisors were saying, yes, they do. So there was a disconnect there. And so the centre decided they would do their own definitions. And so they like got 40 peer staff and the supervisor network to work out these definitions, which are very similar to any of the other definitions we see around the place on peer support. The thing they wanted to stress was the peer workers were to support individuals in living the life they wanted. And that there was a place about, that's great, but how do we know if peer work's actually supporting that? And how do we know if peer work is following the values, those values from the commission I talked about hope and recovery and authenticity and trust and like empathetic and equal relationships. And like they're very similar to SAMHSA and INAP's kind of values. And so the centre set out to look for, is there any research on this? Is there any tools looking at this? And they found that there really wasn't anything that took those values and then put them into, here's the practice, here's them actually turning up. Because it's great, they look warm and fuzzy, respect, it's lovely, empathetic relationships, love them. But there wasn't anywhere that we could really see that kind of stuff, like how it was being looked at, how it was being kind of assessed per se. So they became clear there wasn't that. They did a whole lot of research looking at evidence exchange networks and stuff, and they decided there wasn't anything that really looked at that. So they started a process of a tool called the Service Integrity, Quality and Impact Survey. And it's reliability and validity tested. It took a number of years. I think it's 3.5 years in its development, 3 years. And we really did a lot of testing. So how it started was we took the values from the commission and we went out to peer workers, people receiving peer support, people knowledgeable in the field, and some people, you know, from the US were included in that. And they said, what would it look like if these values were being delivered? So they came up with an original 21 questions, and then they had kind of a bit of what they called an expert panel, including the people receiving services, the peer workers and supervisors, break it down to 17. And then they also said, we want to look at, are these values being experienced? And what's the quality of these? How are people feeling about it? And what's the impact? This is not about performance management. It wasn't designed for that, but you can kind of look at it and have conversations. So integrity piece is peer work actually taking place? And I'm going to walk you through this survey. What's the quality? How do people feel about services before and after peer support? And what's the impact? Do people feel like there's an impact from doing all of this? So I want to share some of those results. So there's over, I think there's around 600 people have utilized this, and the results are kind of coming up now. So in terms of integrity, the mean score for all of that was, yeah, people felt like the values in action were in place where services had defined what a peer role was very clearly, had those values sitting there right at the start, and had other team members kind of as a conversation in that. So here's some of the statements in terms of the integrity. So I'm not going to read all of them, but some of the things that I think really hit home was, and again, the highest possible score is 5. The peer support worker tells me my feelings and opinions are worthwhile. So that was seen as very positive. Reminding people they can express their needs, that the peer worker shares their experiences in ways that was actually meaningful, because you know that peer workers can share, overshare, and that can have an impact. So people felt that, like, when people had training, they were doing that appropriately. I think one of the things that I really liked about this survey is that people felt like the peer worker didn't disapprove of any of their choices. That's one of those biggies, right? If we're supporting people to choose their own path, then we have to make sure, even sometimes when we don't agree, because I know still now, there's times someone says, I'm going to do this, and like I have to swallow my not having a poker face to go, wow, okay, cool. Like, what have you thought about? Have you thought about what happens with some of this stuff? So I've got that. So all of those were positive. Here's the next set of questions. They support, sharing those kind of things, follow through on commitments, encourage me to do things for myself instead of doing things for me. That's that place about not enabling people. And so these kind of comments were what everyone came up with. These statements are what, in this tool, that people would get sent that receive services and respond to like this. So again, it's encouragement, tells me I'm not alone. It's some of that, I get that, supports with community options. And there was one there put in for a group that the peer support worker tells me I can participate in a way that's comfortable for me and the group. So that's that place where we start looking at self-responsibility as well. So again, they're all like 4.5 and above, which is pretty good. And as I said, it's been reliability and validity tested. So in the testing, we gave it to people, and then we came back and re-gave it to the same people, and I'm not the research person, but we did all of that place to check that these statements were actually going to be worthwhile talking through. From there, so they did a piece around quality. And so this was using a tool that's already out there as a part of this to ask people what they were feeling before peer support and what they were feeling after. And so 70% of people were saying they had negative emotions before, 80% positive after. Here's this for me, right? I look at this and I go, why do we keep having to fight for peer support when these are the kind of results we're getting when we implement peer support? Um, so it's that, like, I'm looking at this and I go, people had some of those cool feelings before, those positives, but there was a lot more about the worried, lonely, uncertain, kind of sad pieces. And then after having peer support, and again, this is around the kind of 600 people mark now, like the difference was massive. Um, and I'd love to just, I'm looking at the time, I've got a bit of time to kind of, like, I'd love to hear people's thoughts. And here's the thing, we've only got like a small group. So I'd love people to take themselves off mute and tell me what they feel about this quality result, or put something in a chat box. This is where I'm going to try and get you to participate. Come on, come on.
Hey, Robin. Brian and Kasha asked you questions in the chat. If you just want to scroll back a little bit on there, please.
Okay, I can do that. Charlotte, you don't want to tell me what the questions are? I'm going to have a look.
Sure.
I'll take a quick
Sorry.
look.
Brian asked, will the facilitators email the tool out to us, or is it proprietary at this time?
Okay, so the tool itself, the Centre for Innovation in Peer Support, it's freely available to people who live in Ontario. It is $150 Canadian, which at the moment is like really shitty. It's about $100, maybe a bit more, $110 US. And one of the things is it's $100 Canadian if you're prepared to share your research. So I will make sure that you have the link for the centre. You guys could look at that piece. And I'm looking at Kasha. I wonder if we're doing our process when you were developing yours. I don't know. It would be great to kind of connect anyone that's doing this kind of research. But one of the things that, like, we're trying to look at doing is we really want to try and compare apples with apples. So I haven't finished talking about the tool yet, but I was kind of just putting this on pause because I think this is really powerful. But part of what we want to do at the centre is the more people we can get using this tool, the more we can say, look, in America, we're getting similar results when we stay true to values. In Canada, we're getting these results, and people are starting to use it in Australia. So we can say we're utilising kind of the same tool to be able to do that. So Charlotte's just put the Centre's website up. If you just go to Centre for Innovation in Peer Support, and Centre is spelled C-N-T-R-E, but you can come through us as well. We can link you. But are there any comments that people want to say about this result here? Hello. Is anyone out there in the land of people?
Yes.
No comments?
Rob?
Yeah.
Rob, this is Jack Hotchuk in Salem, Oregon.
Hey.
Hi. Yeah, good to see you. Miss seeing you. Anyhow, yes, I've been involved in my work for years. And one of the things that traditional therapists and the research in traditional therapy always points to, that no matter the form of therapy, the modality of therapy, what really makes the change process go is trust and relationship, over and over and over. And they've shown it in many different ways. My point is that it always is that peers have the goods on what heals. and what helps change. And this data, I think, really helps point out that reality. Thank you.
No worries. I just saw someone asked about what time frame was it measured. So what they've put in place is that people, most of the services have put in place that they will measure this after the 3-month mark, and then they'll measure again like on a consistent basis. So different services have looked at like how often they want to put it in place. So what comes with the tool is an entire manual talking about how to implement it and do that kind of process. So some of the early stuff was 3 months. Some of this is kind of longer term over how people are feeling, but I can certainly get like I'll get, if people want, I can get a little bit more information from the researcher about this. And I think Cindy asked, is there a tool for supervisors to keep focus on, for peers on the values? Like, I think the piece for me about that is I actually utilize this tool with people in terms of I utilize the talking with some of the peer support workers that I supervise, because I still support some supervision with some people, even though I do a lot more systemic kind of stuff now. But one of the things when I'm talking with peer workers in supervision is I might pull up a particular value and pull the statements from this document that link to that value and talk with them through how do they think they're doing their practice in line with these values and these statements. The other thing I've used that kind of process in community of practice as well, to kind of be able to do that. So I'm going to talk through the last little bit of the tool, and then I want to throw it open for conversation, if that's cool.
Hey, Robin, you just missed.
They're also, we're in the process of putting a paper together to put into the International Initiative for Mental Health Leaders about this. And the Centre for Innovation and Peer Support has been recognised with a number of awards in Canada for service excellence. Like they're involved with a lot of the kind of national, larger and province specific, or the equivalent of a state specific kind of process. So I can make sure we get some of those, that information out where people have talked about the tool and stuff. The last piece of the tool, so it's that 3-pronged, like, do we have integrity to the values? What's the quality in terms of people feeling? And also there's impact findings. So do people believe peer support is having an impact on their day-to-day life? So 75 to 80% agreed or strongly agreed. So again, like I don't recall many people saying I didn't have anything, but certainly help them be more hopeful. These are the kind of things we want, right? Help them get connected, improve their ability for self-care. The 2 bottom ones are the biggies for me in this. Well, all of them are big, but I really, when I'm talking to services about why would we implement peer support, and I think part of supervisors' roles is to support that ongoing growth of the peer support workforce in agencies. That's just my opinion. You can ignore me if you want. There's a decreased, people were saying there's a decreased need for emergency and crisis services based on getting peer support and peer support that follows the values of peer support, and it improved their experiences with mental health and addiction services. And I do remember a number of years ago, Clackamas County in Oregon did some research and saw that when they had peer support in their services, it increased the engagement rate. So I think like those kind of things are like awesome, like the impact pieces, the quality, but I'm very clear that we have to make sure that we stay true to those values. So the impact, again, people were saying like this, all of this was very strong, that people felt these kind of things. And there's a couple of other questions that truthfully I forgot to put the slide in for, that have very similar kind of results for people. So again, it's all strong. Now, here's where I'm putting up the info, like while we start to, like I want to throw us open for engagement in this conversation. Like I wanted to have open and honest conversation here and not just do a, oh, let me talk for the whole time of this. So you can get the survey and the manual. Again, I said it was like $100 if you're Canadian, which at the moment is $69 US, or 150 Canadian if you just want to not share your results. But I encourage us to look at, as a community, how we kind of start to share those results and compare the apples to apples. So I'm gonna like take a look at some of these like questions on here, and I want to have an open conversation about this because I can talk about this shit forever. Sorry, I mean, talking to Americans, I can't always swear. Canadians let me say what I want. Americans sometimes a little more upset. So I apologize if I offended anyone. So I'm looking at Annie's. I observe peer staff are initially insecure. They attend and I see a transition. Yeah, so the intentional peer support training, if you're talking about, you know, the stuff that Sherry Mead developed, it is about some of that relationship kind of stuff. And I think for me, we want to look at what are the different peer trainings that are around and pick ones that match us. Like Charlotte just put in, we run the equivalent of a 5-day peer training and we run it online. And I think whoever does your training, what you want to do is make sure that they're given lots of time for people to kind of work and share and like practice those skills. And yeah, I think intentional peer support training is great. I think they are starting to look at it online. I think for me, there's a place where that's in addition to some of the other training, like that's the relationship stuff, and I think that's cool. I have seen places where people have only got that intentional peer support training and have struggled with some of the team dynamics and working through that. And I think as we look moving forward, I think many people are going to start looking at how they do training online. We've been doing it for a number of years, our peer training at the moment, and this is not me going, come to ours, this is just sharing our experience, is that we've got it's 2-hour sessions 2 times a week over 3 months. And so people might be working in positions and doing that and engaging in conversations. And I think one of the things when you spread peer training out a little too, is that you're not like bombing people with 5 days of information where their brains are like saturated, like you're giving people time to process. So I'm just going to look at this. In Florida, a similar survey to provider staff and then ask individuals. I think there's a lot of different surveys out there that are asking people what they think. What we found with this one and our funder and actually all of the researchers and quality people have talked about is there isn't a survey that takes the values of a particular discipline and has put them into a tool to see, is this actually happening? So like this tool has matched the values of peer support to the integrity tool, and we can kind of extrapolate which values are occurring and which aren't. And it was interesting because the funder at a time went, why aren't we doing this for every position? Why aren't we doing this with the psychiatrists, like from the certifying board for psychiatrists? Hang on while I take a quick drink. It's my Blake Shelton drink. Who knows what's in it? Actually, it's iced tea. But anyway, like they asked about that, about psychologists, about caseworkers. So as a result of like the Centre for Innovation in Peer Support doing this piece of work and doing this tool, they're now actually developing similar tools for different disciplines. So they're starting with case managers, case workers, and they're doing a very similar like tool designing that. And it's taking them a number of years because they did all the research and found there actually wasn't anything that currently looked at the values. There was stuff around that value piece at the start. So I think that's one of the things that I kind of love about the development of this, that peer support is now leading other disciplines. And so I think as we go through that, like we get to stand up and say we are leaders. Not only are we delivering exceptional services, but we are leaders in that process. And so I think how I'm utilizing this tool when I'm working with peer supervisors is, again, I said, like in supervision, supervisors are picking a value and some of that integrity tool to go, like, how are you doing this in your practice? What does that look like? Share with me. So they're doing the ongoing piece of keeping people connected to the values. Because as I said, sometimes when people are working in mainstream services, we've got a lot of peer drift. And I see my lovely friend from Oregon talked about, we want to have the principles as a foundation in peer training because we've got people who are being pulled to do some of that medical model stuff, and this is how we try and bring people back to those values. What's that look like? How do you, and having conversations, how do you as a peer worker balance when a team's saying, why aren't you giving me all of this information? And the peer worker's like, well, you know, here's my values, here's my integrity tool, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I'm going to start looking at some of these questions. I'm going to put this slide up because it has the way to contact me and us. So I'm just going to have a look at these. How do you get on the list to innovation? But of course, we want to drive you through our website because we're like that. I'm going to be funny and be truthful with that. But one of the things that I'm doing in like supervisors community of practice too, and so I'm hoping that people are connected to supervisors community of practice, is to like pick one of the values and ask supervisors how they see it occurring in their services, how are they supporting their staff to do that in their services. So, you know, for example, the one about ongoing like development and learning, like we've talked in supervisors community of practices about how do we actually, what are the ways that you support peers to do ongoing learning? Because that's one of the other things that we kind of get in this place where we have people do their initial training and then we're like, oh, what comes after that? And sometimes peer workers left not doing any ongoing training, although I know that many states have a certification process that requires the CEUs ongoing. There are still places that are for some reason I didn't get the capacity to mute people. Maybe I did. No, I didn't. Oh, well, we'll have to go with the noise. So I think it's super important. Yeah, anyone, oh, thank you. I think it's super important for us to look at as supervisors, how do we keep grounding ourselves in those peer like values as well, whether you're using the ones from the Commission in Canada, whether you're using ones from SAMHSA, whether you're looking at the INAPS kind of guidelines and stuff, we want to make sure that we're looking at those as well. So I would love people, we've still got, you know, about 8 minutes. I would love people to share with me how they're staying grounded as supervisors in the value of peer support. You can unmute yourself and chat. We've only got a small group. It's okay. We can hear your voices. Come on. Or just put something in the chat box. Anyone? Come on, guys. One of you. Come on. You can do it. You can.
Robin, can you flip back to the screen that shows the outcomes a little bit further back? I just wanted to, yeah.
Which one? This
Keep,
one?
keep going one more. No, that one, the graph, oh, the integrity results. Thank you. I just wanted to reread that.
Okay, there's 3 of them, so I'll put them up slowly
Perfect.
and let you take a look. But these were the ones, the integrity ones were where we mapped the values from the Mental Health Commission. And we went out and we said to people receiving peer support, peer workers and peer supervisors, if I saw those in action, what would it look like? And we also asked people at the time, if they weren't happening, what would it look like? And so we got like a whole lot of data. We ran focus groups. I ran some in Guam and Palau. So we've got 17 now. We went back to a kind of group and said, here they are. So these are what a range of stakeholders delivering, seeing, receiving were saying. And I love them, and I'm just going to say them because I think they're important. Peer workers tells me my feelings and opinions are worthwhile. Like, we don't always get to hear that when we're in services. I wish we did. And I know there's some great other providers out there who do it, but it's not as common as I would like. You know, I'm reminded that I have a right to express my needs, that I don't just have to follow along with what other people are telling me. Peer workers are sharing their experiences in those ways that are meaningful to people. That we're not expressing disapproval for the choices people make. That's that nail bit, right? Nail in the head. I can see the nail in your head, but I'm actually just going, that must be really tough. Not, well, you've got a nail in your head.
Hey, Robin,
Yeah,
can you
yeah,
hear me? This is Brian. I wanted to speak up. I'm calling from Florida. This has
cool.
been really awesome. In our trainings, you know, Florida is going through a huge transformative like movement, and during the trainings that we have for individuals wanting to become peer workers, peer support in
Yep.
recovery, we're kind of like charging them and encouraging them to be champions and to really go into providers and still keep their jobs, you know, not but be like, you know, in their flame throwing, just be like bringing in the value students that we the participants that we teach are really going in and they're making a difference and as change agents.
Yeah.
And so we're actually seeing providers have new employee orientation for every staff member in the agency to learn what recovery concepts are and what pathways to recovery look like now. And it's so much different than what it used to be.
That is so awesome, Brian. I think the cool thing about that is like we're utilizing kind of things like this tool as well when we teach the peers about this tool and the values and like getting them to take this in with them when they go into roles and say, these are our values. This is what we get. This is how we show integrity in this. And you're right, it is that, you know, like I think many of the peer training now have that change agent piece. I think
Yeah,
we call it in the system, not of the system.
right.
And I've seen there's some services I've seen where peer workers in multidisciplinary teams are being used now in terms of like staff will say to them, oh, we've got someone who's dealing with this. What have you ever experienced that? And what would have made a difference? Like, and having different conversations in those multidisciplinary teams instead of just, oh, we're not going to hear you, or being, tell us what you would do for that person, but people being able
'These mean scores, and that's what we need. We need these tools and their data to show the people that fund, you know, because Florida has
yeah.
been very low. So we're really relying on people with lived experience, you know, and the teachers who have it, you know, and so they're listening. It's really making a difference in a state that has lagged so far behind.
That's really cool because that's what we want. We want people to go in strong and grounded in their values because nobody's saying to a psychiatrist or a social worker, oh, actually, can you go against your values? Like, can you
Right.
go against your code of conduct? And so I think when we first implemented and we first started doing this, people were still learning. And depending on where you were in the country, in the world, was dependent on like how strong we developed people to stand up and stay 55 minutes. But I just, before we finish, I know Charlotte's putting a couple of things up here. I'll just be really quick, PJ, if it's okay. Like one of the things for me is through this time, we actually, as people with mental health issues who have dealt with stuff, get to stand up and support other people because we can share with them how we've got through stuff when there's a lot of people that aren't sure how to get through this now. The other thing I'm talking, a couple of things I'm saying social connectedness in spite of physical distancing. Like, we have the ability to create some fun stuff, throwing stuff on Facebook Live, and I'm hashtagging get your human back on, because that's what I think we're doing as peer workers. That's what I'm hoping communities do over this time, is just get and wanting to ask people. So reach out to us. Chatting with us is like, we're free to chat. Have a look online. We've got stuff happening to support peer supporters and supervisors through this. I'm gonna quickly, oh, whoop, there you go, in case you want that. Oh, thanks, Brian. Reach out. That's awesome. And really, if you want the test, you can either get hold of me, the survey, get hold of me and I'll send your link through to the centre, or get hold of the centre. And I know I'm out of time. I love chatting. I could hang forever. Really appreciate you all being part of this. And like, hang in there, and maybe I'll see you on some of our stuff. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Robin.
Thank you.
And folks, feel free to hang out as long as you like. The next meeting begins at 1 o'clock. So enjoy lunch. And if you want to hang out with Robin, the room is yours.
Hey, Robin, a little if people want.
I'm going to stop the recording now.